Well, Governor Tom Corbett says it is a reality-based budget, but at what cost?
And his first budget proposal includes $866 million in cuts, drastic cuts to education, about 1,500 government jobs being eliminated.
In the 2010-2011 budget, Governor Corbett proposes a $211 million cut from higher education, as well as broad cuts across the entire budget. Although state funds have actually increased by over $2 billion since the 2010-2011 budget, total state expenditures are still being reduced for this current budget. This is primarily because since the 2008-2009 budget, the state has received funding from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, better known as the federal stimulus package. The 2010-2011 budget does not account for any federal funding, of which the state received $3 billion last year. $38 million of that went to the state system of higher education, and $15 million went to Penn State alone.
Despite state subsidies over the past decades, tuition has continued to increase. If the intent was to keep tuition rates down, it failed.
In order to cope with the budget cuts, tuition is being raised 5.9% for in-state students and 4.5% for out-of-state students. While students are clearly upset about tuition raises, historically, Penn State's tuition increases have not caused any direct decrease in Penn State's enrollment. Although in-state tuition has gone up 46% and out-of-state tuition has gone up 33%, enrollment has still increased 11%, which shows that students still want to come to Penn State despite tuition increases.
I came to Penn State because I was undecided and it had the best variety of programs, and I'm in state, so it was cheap.
I came to Penn State because the atmosphere, the campus, and it had the major I wanted.
And what do we want? No tuition! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? No tuition! When do we want it? Now!
I don't know if I'll be able to stay. It's a lot of money as it is right now. I'm not really sure if I can afford to pay much more.
With the whole budget cut bill thing, I should still be able to stay here at Penn State, but it should definitely affect how I approach paying for college.
With the expected tuition hikes for the 2011-2012 year, Penn State will receive an extra $36 million in revenue. However, the cuts to Penn State's budget is $152 million, which leaves $116 million unaccounted for. President Graham Spanier has warned that Penn State may be forced to close one of its 12 branch campuses. Penn State has also named the creation of the Academic Program and Administrative Services Review Corps Council, a 13-member group made up of faculty, staff, and Penn State administration that will look to cut $10 million per year from the Penn State's budget. One area expected to be cut is ongoing campus construction. The Agricultural Sciences Department at Penn State will suffer dramatically if the budget cut goes through. The departments will likely decrease from 12 departments to 6. And because half their funding comes from the state budget, their operations will be jeopardized. The religious studies major will also be cut. All religious studies classes are being absorbed into the history major. Some people have proposed that a tax on natural gas drilling, particularly on Marcellus Shale, could have reduced some of the cuts to education. Governor Corbett, however, refuses to create friction with Marcellus Shale because it creates jobs. However, if it were to impose a drilling tax on Marcellus Shale, then the burden might not fall so heavily on cuts to education. Others have said that the budget should be balanced by completely cutting Penn State's funding. Scott Paterno, the son of football coach Joe Paterno, suggested in an article that the state slash all funding to Penn State in order to help support the other state schools and decrease costs across the board. From a fiscal standpoint, Paterno argues the budget could cut large amounts of money from Penn State's budget, but if one were to cut the same amount of money from the budget of a smaller state school, it would be more devastating to the smaller school since that amount of money would constitute a larger percentage of their budget. Furthermore, the 13 state schools besides Penn State are made up of a larger percentage of in-state students, so cutting from their budget would essentially mean cutting more money from Pennsylvania students, while cutting from Penn State's budget means cutting money from out-of-state students, allowing Pennsylvania to use them to solve its budget woes. While Paterno's solution may help deal with budget issues, what would the result of cutting all Penn State's funding be on the quality of the institution? The university, of course, needs funding to continue functioning at a high level. Currently, Penn State is ranked 15th out of all public schools in the United States, according to U.S. News and Report. The University of California, comprised of multiple universities, has 6 schools in the top 11, including the top 2, UC Berkeley and UCLA, and received $3 billion from the state in 2010. University of Michigan, the 4th best public school, received $363 million from the state of Michigan in 2010. Although cutting all of Penn State's funds would help solve a lot of problems with Pennsylvania's budget, if Penn State wants to be considered a top public university, it will need money from the state. Whether or not the proposed budget will pull our economy out of the gutter or throw our education into the gutter remains to be seen. Penn State will be forced to acknowledge that their funding will need to be cut in order to help a suffering economy, but the state will be forced to acknowledge that the quality of education in the short run will lead to a stronger economy in the long run.
All the same, I'm here to say that education cannot be the only industry exempt from recession. Our public schools do important work, and part of that work must include setting an example.
It is devastating news that could fundamentally change Penn State and our sister institutions in the state and have major negative impacts for the citizens of Pennsylvania and their families.